Hello and welcome to the Minimum Competence episode for Monday, May 12th, 2025. I'm your host for today, Andrew Leahy, a tax and technology attorney from New Jersey. On today's episode, a federal freeze on Trump's agency cuts, a Tufts student's released from ICE custody, a mayor arrested at a detention center, and drug price fixing made cool. Let's remember, a quiet place is the thinker's workshop, a loud one is the legislator's, and read today's legal news. On this day in legal history, May 12, 1970, the U.S. Senate unanimously confirmed Judge Harry A. Blackmun to the Supreme Court, filling the vacancy left by Justice Abe Fortas. Nominated by President Richard Nixon, Blackmun had previously served on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit and was considered a moderate, scholarly jurist. His confirmation marked the culmination of a tumultuous series of failed nominations for the seat, including 2 rejections by the Senate, making Blackmun's 94-0 approval a moment of bipartisan relief. Blackmun would go on to serve nearly a quarter century on the court, authoring over 700 opinions. He is perhaps best known for writing the majority opinion in Roe v. Wade in 1973, which recognized a constitutional right to abortion. The decision would shape political and legal debates for decades and define Blackmun's legacy, despite his broader jurisprudential contributions. Over time, he evolved from a judicial centrist to one of the court's more liberal voices, especially on issues of individual rights and the death penalty. After retiring in 1994, Blackmun remained active in legal education and public service until his death in 1999. The Library of Congress released his extensive papers in 2004, providing scholars with a revealing look into the internal workings of the court during his tenure. His former clerks, some of whom became influential legal figures themselves, publicly remembered him for his deep humanity and commitment to justice. Blackmun's confirmation anniversary serves as a reminder of how judicial legacies can transcend the expectations of those who appoint them. U.S. District Judge Susan Ilston issued a temporary 14-day halt on the Trump administration's federal government restructuring plan, citing a lack of congressional authorization for mass layoffs and agency overhauls. The order came in response to a lawsuit filed by unions, nonprofits, and local governments opposing the large-scale, quote, reductions in force initiated by the Department of Governmental Efficiency, or DGE, led by Elon Musk. Judge Ilston emphasized that the president cannot broadly restructure federal agencies without clear approval from Congress. The plaintiffs submitted extensive evidence showing critical services being disrupted, including nearly complete staff terminations at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health in Pittsburgh. Similar losses were reported at Head Start, the Farm Service Agency, and the Social Security Administration. Ilston found the plaintiffs likely to succeed on the merits of several claims, including violations of administrative law and overreach by DGE, the Office of Management and Budget, and the Office of Personnel Management. The administration's efforts, ordered in February by Trump, aim to automate services, eliminate redundant roles, and reduce federal personnel. Critics argue the changes are destabilizing and harmful to community services. Ilston's ruling aims to preserve the status quo while legal challenges proceed, with a hearing on a potential preliminary injunction scheduled for May 22nd. Rumeysa Öztürk, a Turkish PhD student at Tufts University, returned to Massachusetts after being held for over 6 weeks in a U.S. immigration custody in Louisiana. Her arrest stemmed from a revoked student visa, which the government linked to an opinion piece she co-wrote criticizing Tufts University's response to the war in Gaza and urging divestment from companies tied to Israel. Öztürk was apprehended by masked officers in Somerville, Massachusetts, and was quickly transferred from Vermont to a detention facility in Louisiana. Her legal team, including the ACLU, argued her detention was a retaliatory act for constitutionally protected speech aimed at silencing pro-Palestinian voices on campus. U.S. District Judge William Sessions granted her release after determining she had a strong ground for claiming her constitutional rights were violated. Upon arrival at Logan International Airport, Öztürk expressed relief and gratitude, thanking supporters and calling attention to other detained women. Representative Ayanna Pressley condemned the detention as a politically motivated act of intimidation, citing inhumane conditions and medical neglect during Öztürk's confinement. The case has drawn national attention amid broader efforts by the Trump administration to deport campus activists engaged in pro-Palestinian advocacy. Over the weekend, Newark Mayor Ras Baraka was arrested and charged with trespassing at the Delaney Hall Immigration Detention Center in New Jersey during an unannounced visit by 3 Democratic members of Congress. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, agents detained Baraka after a scuffle at the facility's gate while a bus of detainees was arriving. Representatives Bonnie Watson Coleman, LaMonica McIver, and Robert Menendez Jr. were also present and said to have been jostled during the confrontation. According to ICE and the Department of Homeland Security, the group's uncoordinated attempt to enter the site was unsafe and politically motivated. Baraka, who was campaigning for governor, stated after his release that he was there to support the lawmakers and did not cross into restricted areas. His supporters and congressional aides claim he remained outside the facility's fence and that ICE exaggerated the incident. DHS accused the group of endangering detainees and law enforcement, while the lawmakers insisted they were exercising lawful oversight powers. The detention center, operated by the GEO group, has faced criticism from immigrant rights advocates for allegedly lacking local permits and operating against community wishes. The controversy has become entangled in Baraka's gubernatorial campaign, spotlighting tensions over immigration policy and the role of private detention facilities. President Donald Trump announced plans to slash U.S. prescription drug prices to match the lowest prices found internationally, prompting a global sell-off in pharmaceutical stocks. In a post touting cuts of, quote, 59% plus, Trump previewed an executive order mandating a, quote, most favored nation pricing rule. This would require that Americans pay no more than citizens in the cheapest country for the same medication, a move that starkly contradicts the administration's prior market-driven rhetoric, now seemingly embracing a form of price fixing. Investors, analysts, and drug makers scramble to assess the implications, especially since Medicare and Medicaid represent a major share, around 40%, of U.S. drug spending. The proposed pricing shift offers manufacturers two theoretical paths to comply: lower U.S. drug prices to align with cheaper countries like France or Japan, or raise prices overseas to maintain U.S. revenue levels. It remains unclear which route companies will choose, but economic incentives suggest they'll resist U.S. price drops by inflating foreign costs instead. Trump framed the move as restoring fairness to American consumers, whom he described as having long subsidized global drug development. The executive order follows a prior unsuccessful attempt during his first term to peg Medicare prices to international benchmarks, a plan struck down in court for procedural flaws. The Inflation Reduction Act already initiated drug price negotiations under President Biden, but Trump's new approach could broaden the scope or accelerate the effort. However, legal and legislative obstacles remain, especially since the administration cannot set prices for the commercial market without congressional support. Analysts are watching closely for whether the policy targets just Medicare, specific drug types, or a wider range. Meanwhile, critics note the contradiction in Trump's newfound support for a centralized pricing strategy after years of decrying government's interference in markets. And with that, and as always, I thank you so much for listening to Minimum Competence, your daily news podcast for lawyers. If you're looking for more than Minimum Competence, links to further reading on all the topics touched on today are in the show notes. And reviews go a long way towards helping new listeners to find our show. If you have a moment and can leave a rating or review on your podcast player, we'd sure appreciate it. And if you know someone that might be interested in a story we cover, consider sending them the episode. But remember, nothing here should be construed as legal advice, because it is certainly not that. Minimum Competence is available at minimumcomp.com and wherever it is you get your finely crafted podcasts. If you haven't checked out the website in a while, give it a look. There are complete transcripts and resources for each episode and its corresponding segments, as well as an opportunity to receive new episodes in email, newsletter, form. We'll see you back here tomorrow, and until then, remember, the problem for those who must make choices in the real world outside of the ivory tower is that problems rarely come neatly packaged.